or is contributed to by two things: the oxygen-bound hemoglobin and the oxygen dissolved in the plasma. Correct? The oxygen dissolved in the plasma helps to determine the saturation of hemoglobin, right? Because the higher this is, the higher this is. If we look at the oxygen-bound hemoglobin, that's going to depend on total number of binding sites, meaning essentially how much hemoglobin do you have, which depends on how much hemoglobin you have per red cell and the number of red blood cells you have. So if you have less of these and you're anemic, you will have less hemoglobin and less binding sites for oxygen available. If we look at the percent saturation of hemoglobin, we said again, it's determined in part by the partial pressure of oxygen, but it is also affected, as we said, by pH, temperature, and what's not on here is CO2 and DPG, right? In all of these cases, as the pH goes down, as the tissues become more acidic, as the temperature goes up, as DPG goes up, or as CO2 goes up, what will it do? Will it increase or decrease hemoglobin saturation? Decrease, because it will facilitate delivery of that oxygen to the tissues. If we look at PaO2, if you are asked, what is the only thing that can affect the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood at sea level?
Gas exchange.
Or something that
If we don't
affects
know
gas
anything
exchange,
else,
right? Like
it's
a
gas
respiratory disorder, emphysema. Okay, good. It's influenced by the composition of inspired air. So if you're out in Denver, your PaO2 would be lower than it would be here at sea level because the partial pressure of oxygen in the atmospheric air would be lower. It depends on alveolar ventilation. If you can't get the air to the alveoli, you're not going to be able to exchange it across the blood. So if somebody had an airway obstruction, obviously their PaO2 would be reduced, right? If you get like a big, I don't know, baseball stuck in your trachea, it's not going to work out so well. And it's affected by the diffusion or gas exchange that occurs between the alveoli and the blood. So some of the things that can affect this are the surface area of the alveoli. So if you don't have adequate surface area, that exchange will be affected. If that diffusion barrier gets increased due to pulmonary edema, pneumonia, something like that, that gas exchange will be reduced as well. And you have to have perfusion or delivery of blood to the alveoli, right? You bring all the air there, but if you can't bring the blood there, you're not going to be able to oxygenate the blood. Good so far? All right, alveolar ventilation depends on the rate and depth of breathing. Airway resistance, again, if you've got something stuck in the airway, you can't get the air there. And lung compliance, you've got to be able to expand the lungs to be able to ventilate the alveoli or bring air to the alveoli. The diffusion distance I spoke to you about, that's due to membrane thickness or the amount of interstitial fluid. So again, if this makes sense to you, then you get a large fraction of the things that we've discussed. Do you have questions on any of that? All right, so do refer back to that when you're studying. All right, a little bit about sickle cell anemia. It's prevalent in African Americans. It's actually prevalent in any area that malaria is endemic. You know what endemic, I mean, it's malaria is common in the population of people in a given area. It's what I mean by endemic. These people have an abnormal hemoglobin. The reason it's actually common in areas where malaria is endemic is because having sickle cell anemia and having that hemoglobin defect protects people from, what's the word, infection or active infections with malaria. And more people die from malaria than die from sickle cell. So in those areas, the people that have sickle cell are more likely to survive to reproductive age. And so this gets selected for over the generations. And so it makes sense that every generation there's more people that have this because more survive to reproductive age, and then their offspring are more likely to have it. They have an abnormal hemoglobin called S hemoglobin. The S stands for sickle. What's interesting about it is that it is a single amino acid substitution where valine is substituted for glutamine instead. So just one single point mutation that causes this change. And the problem is that at low oxygen, the hemoglobin starts to cross-link with the hemoglobin molecules start binding to each other, and they form like a gel-like substance, and it comes out of solution, it like precipitates almost, and it causes the red blood cell to assume this weird sickle conformation. The problem with this is that the lower the oxygen is, the more sickling that occurs, but the more sickling that occurs, the less oxygen delivery is able to occur, and the lower the oxygen becomes. So people get into what's called a sickle cell crisis, where it becomes this positive feedback situation, where they start getting a little hypoxic, they develop, a lot of their red cells start sickling, that makes them more hypoxic, which makes them more sickle, and of course you've got to give them fluids, give them oxygen, and try to reverse it if possible. These cells that sickle, they lose their flexibility, they don't have the ability to kind of traverse through the smaller vessels, and that can cause problems with oxygen delivery, and it also increases the fragility of the cells, and so the cells end up being destroyed, so hence why they end up with anemia. So, and this I said, more sickling results in lower oxygen delivery, which just causes more sickling. People can be homozygous or heterozygous for the gene, and that's what's called sickling trait. So there can be varying degrees of severity with this disease depending on what you have. And this I spoke to you about the selected foreign areas where malaria is endemic. And when people get a sickle cell crisis, it's supposed to be incredibly painful, really, really painful. Ischemic pain is really painful. This is showing you the normal hemoglobin. This is showing you sickle cell hemoglobin. And what happens is the hemoglobin comes out of solution, precipitates, and forms like a gel, and causes the cells to take on this shape. This is trying to show you the cells can't make it through the smaller capillaries, so blood delivery to these areas is greatly reduced. And then over time, these cells will be destroyed as they lose their flexibility and they become more fragile. Yeah. Probably to what? Probably because she was so anemic due to the profound destruction of red cells that they needed to increase her blood cells levels that. Yes. It would also, depending on where those blood cells came from, put normal cells back into the circulation as well. But I've heard it's just so incredibly painful. Wow. Is she okay? Wow. Yeah. I always say the hospital is not a place you want to be if you're sick. All right, muscle myoglobin. We spoke about myoglobin, we spoke about the heart, and we said that it was good because it formed or provided like an oxygen storage capacity. You may remember the problem is that when the ventricles contract, the coronary vessels are occluded. So that means that the only time the coronary vessels are actually delivering blood to the cardiac muscle is during diastole. And as heart rates go up, diastolic time gets shorter, and so people will often have trouble if they have any type of occlusion or blockage when heart rate goes up. In normal individuals, it's not too much of a problem because we have myoglobin, and what myoglobin does is it binds oxygen when the partial pressure of oxygen is very high, and it does not release it until the partial pressure of oxygen is very low. And so during diastole, when the coronary vessels are open and there's plenty of oxygen in the heart muscle, myoglobin is loading up all the oxygen it possibly can. Now as the heart goes into systole and it starts working, the vessels are occluded, the oxygen levels start falling and falling and falling, and as soon as they fall low enough, myoglobin starts unloading this oxygen. And so it's able to provide an almost continuous supply of oxygen to the cardiac muscle, even though the vessels are occluded during systole. It's a really nice adaptation. Its dissociation curve is also shifted left, which means it does hold oxygen more tightly, but that's because it doesn't want to release it until the oxygen really, really gets low and the heart really needs it. Shape of the curve is a little different. I'll show it to you, and this is what I just explained. It's also important for rapidly metabolizing skeletal muscle, and that's there as well. This is showing you the myoglobin binding curve. So what we can see here is that at partial pressures below, 20 millimeters of mercury, you can see that saturation falls off very quickly as the partial pressure declines. But at any partial pressure above, say, 30 millimeters of mercury, myoglobin remains almost fully saturated. So again, when the heart is in diastole and there's plenty of oxygen around, myoglobin is binding up all this oxygen. As the heart goes into systole and the partial pressure of oxygen declines, once it gets really low, it will then start unloading oxygen to those tissues. A few questions on that? No. Okay. All right, good. We spoke about the hemoglobin dissociation curve. We said that hemoglobin saturation depends primarily on the partial pressure of oxygen. The higher it is, the more oxygen is found. The lower it is, the less oxygen is found. We said that there are factors that can cause this binding or these binding properties to change. We said that elevated CO2, lower pH, elevated temperature, or increased DPG will cause the dissociation curve to shift to the right, which essentially means that it facilitates unloading or release of oxygen to the tissues. The reverse, so alkalosis, low CO2, low temperature, low DPG, will cause the binding curve to shift to the left, which means that it's going to allow hemoglobin to hold on to that oxygen more tightly when it gets to those areas, because obviously, or I guess it takes it to mean that those tissues aren't working as hard, they don't need as much oxygen. It just helps ensure that oxygen gets delivered to the areas that really need it. All right, I think this I'm going to talk to you about first before we go over it. And that way I can sit down for a minute anyway, which is better than standing up here with a heck of a all night. It's story time. Now I just need like a teddy bear. All right. So this next section deals with CO2 transport. We talked about oxygen transport, and we said that oxygen was carried in the blood in two forms: dissolved in the plasma, which was the PaO2, or the PO2 if you're in venous blood, and bound to hemoglobin, right? CO2 actually gets transported in three forms. Two are the same. One is dissolved in the plasma, that's what we call PCO2, PaCO2 if you're in arterial blood, PCO2 if you're in venous blood or somewhere else, I don't know where else should be. And also bound to hemoglobin. But the interesting thing is that CO2 and oxygen bind two separate, distinct sites on hemoglobin. There's no competition between them. However, having said that, it's a deoxygenated form of hemoglobin that actually binds CO2 with any real affinity. The oxygenated form doesn't, but as we'll see, that's kind of advantageous. The majority of CO2, though, is not carried really in either of those two forms. I'm not going to get the numbers right, but I think it's something like 7% is dissolved in the plasma, 23% is bound to hemoglobin. And so that leaves 70% that's got to be transported another way. And the way that the majority of this transport is as bicarbonate in the plasma. And so the reaction is up there. You see that reaction, CO2 and water gives you carbonic acid, which associates into the bicarbonate plus. So when the red blood cells get out to the tissues that have been actively metabolizing and they've been waiting for that fresh blood to come in and get their oxygen, when it gets there, there's all this CO2 that needs to come over, right? And we said again, some of it gets bound to hemoglobin, some of it gets dissolved in the plasma, but the bulk of it needs to be handled another way. And so the way that it works is that CO2 diffuses into the red cell. Once there, water is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, which is the enzyme that catalyzes this reaction, it combines with water and forms carbonic acid. And carbonic acid, being an acid, spontaneously dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarb. But here's the thing. The cell can't leave the hydrogen ions and bicarb there. If you understand chemistry, what I'm going to say is going to make sense to you. And I'm going to say if you don't understand chemistry, then I'll tell it to you another way, which isn't really the truthful way, but if it helps you understand, then that's all that matters. They're not all lies, just little lies. The real reason is when you dissociate that into H plus and HCO3, remember it's water plus CO2 gives you carbonic acid, gives you these dissociated forms. That reaction is in some sort of equilibrium. So if you start increasing bicarbonates and hydrogen ions to high levels, eventually it will drive the reaction back towards the production of CO2. We can't have that because we need CO2 to keep coming in from the tissues because we've got more CO2 to transport than we really almost have the capacity to do. So we can't allow bicarbon hydrogen ions to accumulate in the red cells, so something has to be done with them so that they're not sitting there piling up, because if they pile up, again, you're going to be limited in how much CO2 you can keep putting across. So the bicarb gets exported out. If you bring a negative ion out, you've got to bring a negative ion in to maintain electron neutrality, so it occurs in exchange for chloride. So bicarb goes out, chloride comes in. The reason I even tell you that is because they call it the chloride shift. That leaves the hydrogen ion. The hydrogen ion binds to hemoglobin, but it again binds deoxyhemoglobin much better than it does oxyhemoglobin. And so what I was going to say to you, if the equilibrium story didn't make any sense to you, understand that you can't allow free hydrogen ions to accumulate in the red blood cell, because if they did, it would make that cell so acidic that it would kill it, right? And so the hydrogen ion binds to these carbamino groups on hemoglobin, and so in that capacity, hemoglobin is essentially functioning as a buffer because it's taking those free hydrogen ions out of solution so that they don't affect the pH. Now, when you get to the lungs, right, so all this occurs, all that gets transported, the amount dissolved in plasma gets transported through the plasma. You've got hemoglobin now, it's binding CO2, it's binding hydrogen ions, and then out in the blood plasma, you got the bicarb that you sent out there, right? And you got tons of it. So now you get to the lungs. When you get to the lungs, air comes into the alveoli, there's plenty of oxygen there. What's going to happen? The oxygen comes across and it binds to hemoglobin. Now remember, I told you that hydrogen ions and CO2 really only have affinity for deoxyhemoglobin. They don't have much affinity for oxyhemoglobin. So as soon as the oxygen binds, what do you think happens to the hydrogen ions they get kicked off the hemoglobin, right? Remember all the bicarb that was out in the plasma? Now we're going to bring it in. You reverse everything. So we bring the bicarb in, chloride back out. The bicarb combines with the hydrogen ion that just came off the hemoglobin. You reverse the reaction, you form carbonic acid, that dissociates into CO2 and water, CO2 gets exhaled. The CO2 that was bound in the plasma, that exchanges across, that gets exhaled, and the CO2 that was bound in hemoglobin came off when you bound the oxygen, that exchanges across, and that gets exhaled. What's so funny?
I don't understand what you just said.
You will. You will. I promise you.
I dropped off. I'm just like, okay.
I don't have videos, but I have pictures. We're going to go over it. I just wanted to give you the note.
Wow. That was a handful.
Believe me, it's hard to repeat. Okay. On that note, I'll stop.
In my mind, I'm like,
So, we have all this
going on?
CO2 in the tissues that we need to transport through the blood to the lungs so that we can get rid of it. There's a ton of it. Like, just tons and tons and tons. It's transported in three forms. 70% of it is carried this way. CO2 comes into the red cell, and I got pictures to show you this. It combines with water, forms carbonic acid, that dissociates into bicarbonate hydrogen ions. This is catalyzed by this enzyme carbonic anhydrase, which is prevalent in red blood cells, and this formation is favored in the tissue capillaries where CO2 levels are very high. CO2 also binds to hemoglobin. They call the compounds, the amino groups that it binds to, carbamino compounds, and the CO2 binding to that. That's all the term means. All I need you to know is that some percentage of the CO2, it's like 23%, binds to hemoglobin as well. And this, I told you, it binds a completely different site than oxygen. There's no competition. And then the remaining 7% just exists as the PCO2 dissolved in the plasma. All right, so this is picture number one. So these are the tissues. They've got lots of CO2, right? The CO2 is going to come across in three ways. One, dissolved in the plasma. That's some small percentage of it. Another larger percentage of it is going to combine with hemoglobin, but again, only deoxyhemoglobin really binds this to any large degree. That's what this is referring to. HbCO2 is the hemoglobin bound to CO2. The majority of it comes in as CO2, combines with water in the red blood cell, in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, forms carbonic acid, and that carbonic acid dissociates into bicarb and hydrogen ions. But as I said, you can't allow these to accumulate in the cell. If you don't understand the reason, then just take my word for it that you can't allow them to accumulate in the cell. Maybe that's just the way to go about it. So we have to do something with it. So the bicarb gets transported out into the plasma. It does so in exchange for chloride, because when you take a negative ion out, you've got to replace it with a negative one. And then we can't leave the free hydrogen ion sitting there, right? Everybody can understand why that's not a good idea. It would make the cell too acidic. Its enzymes, nothing will function properly. So we have to do something with that so it binds to deoxyhemoglobin. So in this case, hemoglobin is functioning as a buffer because it's removing this hydrogen ion, it's removing a free hydrogen ion from being able to exert a change in pH. All right, that's the first part. I think I have more pictures just in case you didn't like that. You want to see another picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another picture.
I don't like
This is out of the salad textbook, which usually makes the figures a little less, I don't know, something. They're a little simpler. So again, we've got a lot of CO2 out in these tissues. We need to bring it across. 7% of it comes in just dissolved in the plasma. That's the PCO2. 23% combines with hemoglobin. The majority of it comes in, combines with water, forms carbonic acid, that dissociates into bicarb and hydrogen ions, and this actually shows it very well. The bicarb gets exported in exchange for chloride in, and the hydrogen ion binds hemoglobin. This should be deoxyhemoglobin, even though it's got an O2 there, because it really only binds the deoxy form quite well. And I think that's what it's trying to show you, is that the oxygen is coming off and then it binds. That sounds so true. Are you good with that? Are you better? All right, so three forms, right? Dissolved in plasma, bound to hemoglobin, and as carbonic acid. The carbonic acid goes out, the bicarb goes out, the chloride comes in, thank you, the hydrogen ion binds to hemoglobin. And that CO2 and that hydrogen ion that bind hemoglobin bind deoxyhemoglobin far better than they do oxyhemoglobin. You good with that? Good, yeah. All right, let me go back through my notes. This, I think, I already said that CO2 loading the tissue fluid contains high levels of CO2. CO2 will diffuse into the bloodstream down this gradient and will get carried to the lungs in the three forms we mentioned. Most of it, the bulk of it, reacts with water to form bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. This occurs slowly in plasma but quick in the red blood cell because they have lots of that enzyme carbonic anhydrase that mediates that reaction. This we said, we can't allow the bicarb or the hydrogen ions to accumulate in the cell. So the way the bicarb is handled is there is an antiporter or chloride bicarbonate exchanger that pumps bicarb out of the red cell in the tissues in exchange for chloride into the cell, and they call this the chloride ship, and the hydrogen ions are buffered by binding to deoxyhemoglobin. And that's essentially what we said. Good? Yes. Questions? Are you doing better?
Yes.
All right, cool. Good. I was talking to your program director yesterday on the phone. Dr. Mark. I like her. Anyway, she said something about that when she meets the incoming classes, she tells you guys that you're not going to, like, that I'm going to be talking to you and it's going to sound like I'm talking in like some foreign language and you have no idea what I'm saying. But just like, it will get better. Did she tell you something like that? Or come see me or something? So when you said that, I thought of that. We'll work through this. Here's another picture. I don't like this picture quite as much, and the numbers aren't quite the same, but again, it doesn't really matter as long as you understand that the smallest amount is dissolved in the plasma, the middle amount is bound to hemoglobin, but most of it is transported as bicarb. All right, so this shows you the CO2 coming in. Some small percentage is dissolved in the plasma. The next, some 20-something% combines with hemoglobin, but then the bulk of it comes in, combines with water to form carbonic acid, that dissociates into bicarb and hydrogen ions. The bicarb goes out in exchange for chloride in, and the hydrogen ion combines with deoxyhemoglobin. Good? All right, good. This is a lot of writing to explain something that's not so hard to explain. So let me just try, and then when it doesn't make sense, you tell me and I'll go through it again. So we said that hydrogen ions and CO2 bind deoxyhemoglobin better than they bind oxyhemoglobin. So does it make sense to you then that in a tissue that's really metabolically active, that area or that blood getting to that area is going to have a bigger capacity to carry CO2? Because when the hemoglobin gets to an area that's very metabolically active, the partial pressure of oxygen there will be low, and it will unload a lot of its oxygen. So there will be a lot of oxygen in the deoxyhemoglobin form, and the more deoxyhemoglobin you have, the more CO2 and the more hydrogen ions you combine. Does that make sense? All right, cool. That's what the next thing is saying. They call it some weird effect like the Haldane effect, the Bohr effect. I really don't care what you call it. And that's what this is saying. Low oxyhemoglobin, more CO2 can be transported by the blood, and that's because deoxyhemoglobin binds CO2 better than oxyhemoglobin does, and it also binds hydrogen ions better than oxyhemoglobin does. This allows more hydrogen ions to be removed from the solution. Don't worry about shifting the equilibrium. I think you get it. You bring more hydrogen ions in, you have brought more CO2 in, essentially. All right, now we get to the lungs. Yes?
So is deoxyhemoglobin just a hemoglobin that has no oxygen on it, and an oxyhemoglobin is a hemoglobin that has oxygen?
You know, that is the strict definition. So the strict definition is deoxyhemoglobin is hemoglobin that has no oxygen, and oxyhemoglobin is hemoglobin that has any oxygen, even if it has one. But I think it becomes difficult to think of it in terms, I mean, for our purposes and for this, I think it's just, that is the correct definition. And I think when thinking about it, it's just easier to just the more you have in the deoxygenated form.
I was also then just wondering, does one turn into the other? So once the oxygen is unloaded, then that hemoglobin becomes deoxyhemoglobin.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so it's not like there's a whole different,
no, it's only there's two different types.
Like,
no.
Okay.
No,
molecule.
they're interconvertible.
It's just the fact that it can have oxygen bound or not.
Right. And in a tissue that's very metabolically active, where the partial pressure of oxygen is low, you're more likely to have more in the deoxy form because it would have been loaded a lot. And therefore more capacity to bind CO2 and more capacity to bind hydrogen ions. And that's all that's trying to say. All right, now we get to the lungs, right? And everything just goes in the reverse direction. So you get to the lungs, oxygen comes in, and hemoglobin binds that oxygen. As soon as it binds that oxygen, what does it do? It kicks off the CO2, it kicks off the hydrogen ion. The CO2 that it kicks off can immediately be exchanged across the airway, and the CO2 that was dissolved in the plasma can immediately be exchanged across the alveoli. But what are you going to do with the hydrogen ion? It's sitting there all by itself. It's sad, it's lonely, it needs its partner. Where's its partner? It's the bicarb, right? So what does the bicarb got to do? It's got to come back into the red cell. So you bring bicarb back in, chloride goes back out, bicarb combines with the hydrogen ion, that forms carbonic acid, that dissociates into H2O and CO2, and the CO2 exchanges across. And I think I got pictures for that too. It's just the reverse. That's all it is. All right, so hemoglobin binds oxygen. This results in a lower affinity for hydrogen ions and for CO2. The CO2 will just diffuse across. The hydrogen ion will bind the bicarb that now is brought back in to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid dissociates into CO2, and the CO2 diffuses from the blood into the alveoli, and it's exhaled. And the amazing thing is this all happens like that, without even having to think about it. All right. This is trying to show you. So now you are in the alveoli. Oxygen comes across, it binds hemoglobin. When it binds hemoglobin, that kicks off the hydrogen ion. This is just dealing with this part of it. You see the bicarb? The bicarb is being brought into the cell in exchange for chloride out. This is trying to show you that that's combining with that hydrogen ion. That forms carbonic acid. That dissociates to form CO2 and water, and the CO2 gets exhaled. This is showing you the hemoglobin that was bound to CO2. It gets kicked out because that hemoglobin will become oxygenated. That diffuses across and is exhaled. And the 7% that was dissolved in plasma diffuses across and is exhaled. And there you are, back where you started. Does that make sense? Are you better now? Are you good?
Actually, no.
Oh.
I wanted to for the collagen effect, where does that occur? Because if you say that
In the tissues.
in the tissues, okay.
But you don't have to know it as the Halley effect or as the Bohr effect. It's just referring to the fact that the more actively metabolizing a tissue is, the more hypoxic it will be. And the more hemoglobin will be in the deoxygenated form. So it will have a greater capacity to carry CO2 and hydrogen ions. Other questions? Okay. I have another picture.
Yay.
So the CO2 that's dissolved in plasma, these are supposed to be the alveoli, drawn much better than the picture I drew for you a couple weeks ago. That comes across. The hemoglobin that was bound to CO2, the CO2 that was bound to hemoglobin, that CO2 gets kicked out because now this hemoglobin becomes oxygenated. And the bicarb that was sitting out here comes into the red cell, combines with the hydrogen ion. Where the hydrogen ion came from, it came off the hemoglobin, even though I didn't show it to you. And that ultimately gets converted into CO2 and water, and the CO2 comes across. Good, same thing, just shown differently. All right, let's see if any of this made any sense. Which of the following occurs when red cells get to the lungs? Bicarb is exported out of the red blood cell. Carbon dioxide binds hemoglobin. Hydrogen ions are released from hemoglobin. Chloride ions are pumped into the red blood cells. So let me let you answer that.
3. This could take a while, guys. Anyways, let's go to this. Chloride shift. Chloride ions pumped into red cells. That's all I can think of.
All right, what is the right answer? So let's see, yes, it should be 3. So bicarb is exported out of the red cell. No, when you're in the lungs, it should come in. Carbon dioxide binds hemoglobin. No, because hemoglobin will be oxygenated, we'll kick it off. Hydrogen ions are released from hemoglobin, that's correct, because once it binds oxygen, it kicks it off. And chloride ions are pumped into the red cell, no, they're pumped out because bicarb comes in. So the right answer should be 3. Wow, really?
And I answered.
Wow, all right. I'm feeling better.
But I read.
All right.
Open note, I would have.
You know, I'm sorry. I agree. All of our lives would be so much easier, wouldn't it? I agree. I get fired. But I agree. All right. A little bit about acid-base balance. When we get to kidney, we speak a lot about this, but this talks about the role of the respiratory system and acid-base status. So pulmonary ventilation is adjusted to maintain pH. Normal blood pH, again, for the purposes of this course, is 7.4. There is a range of normals, but it just makes it easier in talking about the normal physiology to address it this way. So for us, we're going to say anything below 7.4 is considered acidosis. Anything above is alkalosis. If you are acidotic, meaning if your pH is too acidic, that should make you start breathing, increasing your rate and depth of breathing, because Hydrogen ions with the CO2 will stimulate the chemoreceptors to increase your rate and depth of breathing to restore normal pH. Does that make sense? That we spoke about. Alkalosis, if you are too alkaline, your chemoreceptors will not be stimulated, your drive to breathe will be less, and your respiratory rate will slow so that you can retain CO2 to make you more acidic. Does that make sense? Good. Now, that's assuming that your respiratory system is working properly. Sometimes people will have an acid-base disturbance because their respiratory system isn't able to do that. So if respiratory measures fail to restore normal levels, this is usually due to a respiratory problem, and then we term the disturbance either respiratory acidosis or alkalosis. So if somebody has a respiratory acidosis, that means that they have an acidosis because there was something wrong with their respiratory system. For example, if somebody has COPD, if somebody has emphysema, what is their problem? They can't exhale fully. They trap CO2. Does it make sense to you that their CO2 levels would start to accumulate? Their respiratory system, even if it's stimulated to increase the rate and depth of breathing, probably won't be able to get their values back to normal levels because they're never going to be able to exhale properly. If this is the case, this is termed a respiratory acidosis. That means they have an acidosis because there's something wrong with the respiratory system. Inadequate ventilation results in CO2 retention and pH falls. If somebody has a respiratory alkalosis, this means that they have an alkalosis because they're breathing faster than they should be. So this would be like somebody who has a lot of anxiety, has a panic attack, starts breathing very heavily, CO2 levels will fall, and their pH will rise. However, you can have an acidosis or an alkalosis, not because there's anything wrong with your respiratory system, because something else is wrong. So the examples, those are called metabolic acidosis or metabolic disturbances, termed metabolic acidosis or alkalosis. Probably the best example of a metabolic acidosis is diabetic ketoacidosis. Are you familiar with that? So if somebody has profound type 1 diabetes that isn't treated, it can happen in type 2, it's only end stage. Type 1 diabetes that isn't treated, what's their problem?
Sugar.
Friends.
So they have high blood sugar, but what's their problem with respect to energy? How do they get their energy?
Making sugar out of one sugar, not one carb.
Yeah, they can't take sugar in from the blood, so they've got to use alternative energy sources. And one of the things is they'll do is they'll metabolize fats and fatty acids to try to shuttle it to the blood cycle or other energy pathways. And a byproduct of that metabolism is keto acids. And so when somebody is using this as a primary means of their energy source, they start to accumulate and build up keto acids to high levels, so much so that the body can't deal with it and results in what's called ketoacidosis. In that case, the acidosis they have has got nothing to do with the respiratory system being the problem. It has to do with the fact that they're building up these keto acids. What would you expect that person's respiratory rate to be in order to help this situation? Would it be higher or lower? Higher, right? So in this case, they have an acidosis. The respiratory system is functioning normally. So that acidity should stimulate the chemoreceptors. Their respiratory rate should be much higher than normal to try to help to get rid of some of that acid. Does that make sense? You can also have a metabolic alkalosis, not always so easily, but the best example I can think of, there's other examples, but you know people that take like Tums in like high amounts, they can actually take so many of them because they're alkaline that they can overwhelm their body's capacity to deal with it and give themselves a metabolic alkalosis. Probably one of the more common causes is pathological. Somebody vomits for a long period of time, they get rid of so much stomach acid that they end up with an alkalosis. What would you expect the respiratory system to do in this case? Their rate should slow to try to retain CO2 to make their pH more acidic. So usually the way that it works is if the problem is the respiratory system, so if somebody has a respiratory acidosis or an alkalosis, the kidneys will try to help the situation. So if they have a respiratory acidosis, kidneys will try to retain bicarb and have blood bicarb levels go up. If somebody has a respiratory alkalosis, the kidneys will try to excrete bicarb to get rid of the excess base. If somebody has a metabolic acidosis, the lungs will try to correct by increasing ventilation. And if somebody has a metabolic alkalosis, the lungs will try to correct by decreasing ventilation. And that's, I think, what most of that is trying to say to you. All right, so these are examples of ketoacidosis. Diabetes is probably the best example of this. You can also get it from diarrhea for long periods of time. It can cause too much bicarbonate loss, and it can cause this. And a metabolic alkalosis, yeah, and acid use can cause it, probably vomiting is one of the pathologies that can do it. So this, I think I told you, a respiratory acidosis or alkalosis is due to abnormal CO2 levels, and a metabolic acidosis or alkalosis is usually due to abnormal bicarbonate levels. In the case of somebody who has a metabolic acidosis, such as that diabetic ketoacidosis, the reason their bicarb falls is because the bicarb gets used up trying to neutralize the acid. And somebody who has a metabolic alkalosis, it's usually because they have either gotten rid of too much acid or they retain too much bicarb for some reason or another. Whatever the primary disturbance is, meaning whatever is causing the problem, will try to be compensated for by the other systems. So again, for example, a metabolic acidosis would be compensated by the respiratory system with an increase in ventilation. So as long as the respiratory system is functional. All right, which of the following would be expected in a patient with severe emphysema? Reduced CO2 levels, respiratory acidosis, elevated bicarbonate production, none of the above, more than one of the above. Any of this makes sense.
2. Let's be 2. Or it can be more than one. Carbon dioxide is going to be increased right here.